Hey, everybody. This is Signals in Higher Education. I'm Darin Francis from Harbinger Lane. Joining me today, Dr. Rindy from Slippery Rock University. Welcome, John.
Hey, thanks for having me, Darin. Appreciate it. Looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Well, Dr. Rindy, you've really built an interesting career I want to sort of hit on before we get into all the wonderful things about work-based learning, experiential learning. 20 years in the corporate world. Then you shifted and hit a few different institutions on your way to Slippery Rock. And you've progressed your career to this point all the way to Assistant Vice President for Career and Academic Progress. Along the way, continuing to have interdisciplinary background as well that we should probably talk about, but I'm interested in just sort of your career ladder, right? Like the choices that you made when you think back that sort of took you out of the corporate world into higher ed and then the progression all the way to Slippery Rock. And you don't have to sum it up, but can you at least sort of walk us through it in a way that helps connect the dots?
Sure. I had a faculty member who once used the phrase, I've learned less and less about more and more, and now I know practically nothing about everything. It's been interesting. Well, it really comes down to something I work with students on a lot, and that is saying yes to opportunities, recognizing that this is a chance for growth and that somebody else is offering the opportunity because they see something in you. And so, I started in the laboratory business back in 1985. Clinical, and then it grew into industrial hygiene and environmental laboratory sciences. And the reason I was able to move into different roles there is because I kept saying yes when they'd say, would you like to learn something new? Or I was just curious in saying, hey, when I bring these things back to the lab, what happens to them? Put on some gloves and we'll show you. And so really I try to talk to students about saying yes to things that maybe make you a little uncomfortable, not just doing your job, but being curious about the job, because when you take on new roles, you make yourself more valuable to your employer. So that's really been the story of my life. I kind of like doing new things. I'm not the kind of person you would hire to say, hey, this is running really good, now keep it running really good. That's not who I am. I'm definitely hey, we want to take this in a new direction kind of guy. We need somebody to gently break some stuff. And so I saw those opportunities in most of my higher education experience, first up at Teal, where they were trying to do some new things. And who knew, 5.5 years later, that I would be able to gain some great experience in career and work-based learning and grants and instructional technology. At the same time as I was teaching adjunct at Youngstown State for 18 years, I also got to work in a classroom that was a distance-based classroom, and then design some online courses as part of a practicum for my master's. And it all just came together where this role, the initial role at Slippery Rock was the career director role. But then 6 years ago, our president asked if I would assume responsibility for creating a new group within enrollment management that helped with more of the keep them here side, right? We know admissions and graduate admissions and financial aid are on the get them here side. We're more on the keep them here side. And it's been an interesting journey, and it all came from saying yes, but it all came from really great leaders. I would say mentors who sometimes you don't realize are mentors till later on, who saw something in me and said, hey, we think you could do this, and would you be interested? So even my current role was sort of going to be a more of a temporary experiment, and that was 6 years ago. And here we still are. But we've been doing good work together, and thanks for letting me join in and talk a little bit about some of the things we've been doing overall, as well as in work-based learning.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I like starting here because in my real life, my real work, I talk to higher ed leaders on a regular basis, and I actually don't see a lot of people kind of cross-pollinating from corporate to higher ed. And I like the framing, sort of, A, saying yes to opportunities, and also B, I think what you're kind of saying is being curious, right? Like having that constant curiosity bug that kind of propels a new idea forward. We'll definitely get into some of the innovations that you've developed. But now at Slippery Rock, you lead a team of I think you said 150 people.
In total, yes, in CCAP, we have a total of 150 people, and that includes full-time staff, part-time staff, graduate assistants, peer academic coaches, peer career coaches, and all of our tutorial, our CRLA certified tutors, as well as an army of other student peers and student leaders. So it's a sizable group.
Contextually, I think we spoke about this before, but I always find it interesting when institutions, when you spot innovation in an institution through enrollment management, and enrollment management often, when they're innovating, start to take over more of the responsibility for the full life cycle of the student, right? Hence why your world sort of sits inside of that space, which just intuitively, I wouldn't have, if I was trying to make a map of your organization, I wouldn't have you sitting in that space. But I would love it if you could talk a little more about it, because in our initial conversation, you immediately started talking about things like retention and persistence. And so talk a little bit about what you think the overall impetus was or is today for having your unit sit inside of that sort of student success area like this.
Some of it is market based, and some of it is really Slippery Rock uniqueness. We had here for over 30 years a woman by the name of Dr. Amanda Yale, who is really nationally known in strategic enrollment management. Back when SEM was a new concept, Amanda was teaching it to other schools pretty much nationwide. And Amanda's retired about a year and a half ago, and that's who I reported to. Definitely one of the best supervisors I've ever had. And I learned so much from Amanda when she was here. We have an excellent vice president for enrollment management now, Mike May, who moved up from our director of undergraduate admissions. So that's who I report to now. So, of course, as you'd expect, we are a tuition-driven institution because we're part of the 10 university state system of higher education in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And so we are a tuition-driven institution. Part of our budget comes from the state, and we know that the demographics show that in northeastern U.S. and in the Midwest, schools are going to be deleteriously affected by the downturn in that college-age demographic. So schools are inventing new ways to create programs for adult learners as well as workforce development. I know a lot of institutions are getting into workforce development. We've always sort of felt that our bread and butter is still that 18 to 22-year-old student, and that we do it very, very well. Many years ago, our president, when I first came to the Rock, was Dr. Bob Smith. Our student center is named after Bob. He still works in the Tennessee system, I believe, at the Board of Regents, and a fantastic guy. Stay in contact with him from time to time. He said, you know what, through all of this, we are going to become the science school in the West. We are going to become the business school in the West of Pennsylvania. We are going to remain the education school in the West of Pennsylvania. So he had this great resolve, which I sort of inherited, and he was very close with Amanda as well. So she had that same resolve. So failure was not an option for us. So Slippery Rock started in reinventing ourselves a long time ago. You know, we have had over 80% first-year student retention for 20 years, pretty much, whereas other schools, not only in our system, but when you look in some of the other state systems, are still hovering in the high 60s and maybe low to mid 70s. And some of our schools are really coming up now. We have 3 of us in the 80s now of the 10, and some in the high 70s, which is really great to see that happening in Pashy. But all of that was really guided by our enrollment management side of things. And what's really nice is Amanda had come from the academic side and had been promoted to vice president for enrollment management. And so she already had that faculty perspective, and being that we're a union campus, she already had the respect of our faculty. So we were able to get a lot of things done, we meaning Amanda first, and then the rest of us in enrollment management as we joined the team over the years, because we have a very close relationship with academics. Academic affairs is a separate division, but in many cases you would never know it because our faculty are so cooperative. And so things like tutoring, success coaching, career really it never needed to be moved under academic affairs and the provost per se, because we already had that relationship. You know, not only does my supervisor, our vice president for enrollment, sit on cabinet with the provost, Dr. Zieg, but the two of them meet regularly outside of cabinet too, so that they know what's going on. On our campus, I can walk into the office of any of our deans and have a conversation. Some of the deans sit on our academic continuity committee, which I oversee, and it's a very organic relationship. The other thing that's really unique here at Slippery Rock that may not be as unique across our system and in any other state system where the faculty and staff are unionized is that we've never had a contentious relationship with our faculty. I know our president and vice president of APSCUF, our faculty union here, very, very well. Michelle, who's the vice president, and I served as co-chairs of strategic planning for our university for about 3 or 4 years together. And Jason and I, who's the president, we've gone bicycling together and we have normal conversations. We just had dinner a few weeks ago. That's not common. That's not common. It's usually more adversarial. That's just not a thing here. We are not adversarial. And so we all seem to be on the same page. Just doesn't say enough. We're very like-minded. We're very like-minded on our campus, and moving our mission forward.
Well, it's a culture that isn't afraid to have a really lofty vision.
It's safe to have a lofty vision, Darin. I love how, yes, that's a great way to put it. It is safe here to have a lofty vision and to take risks.
That, in my experience, especially in regional public universities, is just, unfortunately, it feels like sometimes compliance is the goal as opposed to compliance so that you fit into your part of the inner workings is the goal in many situations, as opposed to really sort of leading with a loftier vision. But I love what you guys have put together. It's not just words, it's organizationally imprinted. And now I want to get into your organization and sort of dial in an understanding for folks about all the work that you're doing. We'll get into the work-based learning piece, but your 3-function CCAP model jumped out to me. So just for everybody else, you lead the Center for Career and Academic Progress, CCAP for short, and you've structured it in what you're calling a 3-function subdivision. Talk a little bit about what that is and why that was important to you.
Absolutely. CCAP has 3 faces to it right now, and we've been exploring a 4th. But the 3 faces of the Center for Career and Academic Progress here at the Rock are student-facing. So that's the side that most people see, providing career support to our students, providing academic life coach support from our success coaching area, peer academic coaching, tutorial services, advisement for our exploratory studies students, which are now being retained at close to 87%, up from only about 68% once we became more deliberate with our exploratory programs here in CCAP. So that's the side that most people see and assume that, that's the folks that work with students. And that's unquestionably most of the work of our folks. But there's 2 other sides to our center that really form the basis of some of the successes we are seeing here in terms of first-year student retention and our increasing graduation rates. And that is the consulting side. To work on a union campus, you really don't want to go into faculty departments and say, I need you to do this. Here they would, but that doesn't foster long-term cooperative relationships. I've always said, and my advice to even people at other institutions is never go to an academic department and say, do this, or I need you to do this. And I know that's convenient to do, especially in states where you don't have a union faculty, or at a small private where you don't have unions. But that's not developing enrollment. And you and I have talked about, I don't believe in buy-in because that means I'm selling you something. I believe in getting people enrolled in an idea, which is not expedient, but it is enduring. And so when I work with a department, let's say, or somebody in our area works with a department, it's always, hey, we saw this in your data. Would you have time to consult on this? Because we think you could probably be retaining another 1% of your students by next fall if we talked about some ways of doing it that fit with your departmental culture. So the second side of CCAP is a consulting. We're an internal consultant. And then the third side is research. We're very strong. We have a lot of people with very strong data backgrounds in our area. Plus, we consult regularly with our Office of Analytics and Decision Support. Our director up there is Dr. Kevin McCarthy, who's a wonderful partner to us. And so the question is, what needle are we really trying to move here? And so if we're going to design an experiment to improve on, let's say, first year retention from a particular program, we need to measure that. We don't want to just look at what's the retention after a year. We want to look at that over time, but we also want to look at other metrics. So we design retention experiments. We run them usually over several semesters. And then we ask the question, all right, did this really cause this impact that we're seeing? Okay, good. Then let's invest more money in doing that. But we also, at the same time, Darin, we create stop doing lists. Our stop doing lists aren't just, oh, well, we don't like doing that anymore. It's always like the data shows that this is not particularly impactful. How do we change it, or how do we get rid of it? Because we can't continually be adding more and more and more to just do. As you talk to people at state universities that are tuition driven and a lot of times understaffed, people say, hey, I'm already here till 7 o'clock. I'm here 7 to 7. What more can I possibly do here? And so you have to make a stop doing list, and that stop doing list has to be data informed, strongly data informed. But that goes all the way back to the beginning. Why are you doing this program in the first place? Why are you doing the program in the first place? You have to have those metrics in place. So 3 phases: student facing, internal consulting, and research design and assessment. And then, of course, we are going with the idea of adding a 4th phase, and that would be external consulting as well, particularly on retention, not on other areas of higher education.
Well, that's great. And maybe we'll have you back to talk about that if you do it, because that'll be interesting. I could probably talk to you all day about your consulting approach, because I find that as a consultant very appealing. Just as an aside, I want to talk actually about your enrolled versus kind of buy-in approach, because in my work with organizations that want to have partnerships with higher ed, my approach, instead of selling harder, is actually what I call co-readiness, which feels a lot like what you're signing people up to in enrollment and enrolling people. And I feel like we landed on something similar. In 20 years sort of selling into higher ed, I found all of the fancy sales techniques to just be so lacking. And I had to land on something that would work for me as an individual contributor, and then as a team leader, and as an executive. And in higher ed, I just found that what I was seeking wasn't a sales technique. I was seeking co-readiness, both me and my organization's ability to deliver value to you, and your readiness to work with us, right? Like if you like the idea of working with us, but on your list of priorities, it's down here. What am I doing? I'll connect that with you later when that priority is more aligned, right? So in any event, I'd like to, you showed me a piece that you wrote a while ago on this enrolled concept. Can you just double click on that a little bit more? Talk about where that came from for you. What was the moment that you just said, oh my goodness, I've got to reframe this for my team in order to really advance in the way that we need to?
Well, I think a lot of my philosophy in leadership has evolved over the years. When I was a CEO, I was CEO of a healthcare company, and we had facilities in several different states. We ended up getting into the hospital business. We did a lot of work in rural medicine. And I look back to those days before I had any formal leadership training, right? I had a business degree and I had an environmental degree, what have you. And but really my doctoral work in leadership really changed my perspective of a lot of different things. And I think that not only in observing how people behave when you're trying to get them to do something over the years, but also in a lot of the leadership theorists out there, like Peter Senge and Chris Argyris, some really great leadership theorists. I really developed this alternative approach, and that is, the article you're referring to is called "Why Buy-in is BS." And and what I say in the article, in short, is simply, if my boss tells me to do something that I don't want to do, I'm going to do it because he's my boss, but I never bought into it. Even if he comes and says, this is a good idea, come on, let's go. I'm never actually going to buy in. However, if he says, John, here's the why behind all this. This is the long-term why. Okay. Here's the what, and here's the how I'm proposing. What alternative how do you propose, given your own paradigm in the Center for Career and Academic Progress and how busy you are and what have you? And that goes back to Simon Sinek's Golden Circle, of course, as well. And then I found that if you over time include people in conversations, which is not expedient, it's not expedient, then people are more apt to actually sign on to things. So when I first came to the Rock, we needed to significantly change the strategic approach of the career office. I mean, the career office had seen about 300 students the year before I came at an institution that had 7,500 students, but it had 5 people. And that could not continue, right? We wanted, not just because folks weren't busy enough, it was because students need engaged in career development. We are the window to the world, and students need to know that and then engage with that. And so we worked together on a strategic plan over time, over several months. And then I kind of wrote it all up and I said, I'm going to put this back in the kitchenette on the table. You just go back and make the changes you want to it. Again, dangerous, risky, and vulnerable. And they did that. And then I rewrote it all up again and said, all right, if you're all ready, sign your name to the bottom of it, that this is what we're doing. And that's where the concept of enrollment came from. They're actually putting their name on that document. Now, you don't have to go that far every time. That was more parochial because we were dealing with a single office at the time. And sometimes that's harder when you're doing strategic planning more broadly. But I love your concept of co-readiness and work-based learning. I see that as well. How many companies come to an institution and say, we want an intern. Well, I had that recently. And what the person really wanted was somebody to come and do free work for them, right? It wasn't an internship. They didn't have an expert in accounting overseeing the accounting person. They wanted a student to come in and work for free or very little money to do bookkeeping for them. And that's not an internship. So we're not co-ready at that point. So we changed the definition to, I want to post a part-time job for a bookkeeper. And everybody's happy at that point.
I didn't realize that we would hit on this, but I just want to flag it because you said something that I want to double click on in case it's also got a similarity. So when I help people think through co-readiness, I help them think through several different layers of evidence of that co-readiness, two of which are risk tolerance and vulnerability. And you just mentioned, by putting that on the kitchen table for people to go and look at, you mentioned risky, and it was risky and vulnerable to do it. So I just have to flag it. I'm just any added comment to that, because those are two interesting words that I don't hear talked enough about. Vulnerability and risk implies vulnerability, but then specifically being vulnerable as a leader. What is that as to you in your process? Tell me your thoughts on it.
In my personal leadership process, I think our staff here would say, and we've had, what's really great is during my time here, we've had very low, almost no turnover, which is unheard of in higher education. But one of the approaches is people know I'm a real person. I tend to wear my emotions on my sleeve, sometimes more than I should. Our staff is very aware of what's going on in my life. Last year, I had some interesting health things come up. They knew all about that. And so we're all good. I'm good now. But people need to know their leaders are real folks. And what's really hitting home with me, getting back to the original subject of co-readiness, is what a waste of money it would be to hire a consultant to come in to help with something and nobody even comes to the meeting. Nobody even wants to talk to that person. That is not co-ready. And while you might be getting a check for your work, they're not going to get much out of that. And it's the same thing here, Darin. I still have some, we have 160 majors and minors here. And absolutely, when I look at some of our data, we use Cognos as one of our data tools here. And let's say I pull down program retention by program. I have 4 or 5 what I would consider, and sorry for using the overused term, low-hanging fruit programs where we can significantly improve retention. And some of that would be through early college work-based learning or some of our other work-based learning programs. But they they haven't gotten past the fact that, well, we have an internal retention committee. And I want to say, yeah, but
Right.
you've still been losing the same percentage of students for 20 years.
Right.
Let's, but they're not ready. They're not ready. And that's okay, because we have not only other low hanging fruit, but we have other systematic things that we can be working on here at the institution that will keep us plenty busy, like our exemplary advisor program. How do you standardize? That's an evil word on a union campus. How do you standardize advisement on a union campus? Well, we don't standardize it. Instead, we give faculty opportunities to learn and then get acknowledged for that learning, not only in terms of plaques and a digital badge, but also in terms of elements that they can upload to their tenure and promotion portfolio, because that's service to the institution, my friend. And again, that's enrollment. Over time, folks come back for more learning. They get those acknowledgments. Students are more confident because they're going to faculty who are labeled as exemplary advisors. And we know if you want to move a retention needle at an institution, improving advisement, that relationship is one of the biggest things. You know, my big five: goal setting, relationship building, knowing your values, and making sure learning and your learning at your university is in the top of your values, taking action on those values, and a growth versus a fixed mindset. That's what's going to get students to walk across your stage, whether you're an R1 research-based university or a more tuition-driven state institution or a small private with a small endowment that struggled. Do your students set long-term and short-term goals? Are they building relationships short-term on your campus, because relationships retain, long-term with the employers and alumni that are going to employ them and mentor them someday? Values. Video gaming cannot be above school. It can't be, and students need to know that, and that's why we're so insistent about that at orientation. I get to speak with a lot of our students through the recruitment cycle and the funnel, as well as during orientation, and we make it very clear. We also enroll parents in that process too. We coach parents through that first semester as well, so they're asking good coach-based, what, why, and how questions of their students, open-ended questions that help students come to their own conclusions as to changes they need to make. So when everybody told us 6 years ago, you're never going to be able to move a needle from 81 to 82% retention at a state school, you just won't. You're already at the best you're going to get. Well, this fall we are at 86.4% retention of our first year students.
That's amazing.
I have a few years left here, but I'd love to see us get to 87. I think we can be a school retaining at 90%. I really do. I see it in the data, and I see it in the will of the institution as well. Whether it'll happen during my time or not, I don't know. But we've got some fabulous people in CCAP who, even several years out, I'm already starting to transition into new roles here, so they're ready to go.
I mean, I want to jump into work-based learning. This is also interesting, but I think as a nice transition into that, I know you use Civitas extensively for persistence studies. And we've been talking about the retention experiments, but how does this kind of evidence inform work-based learning for you?
Well, about a year and a half ago, the CEO of the Pesce Foundation, that's the Pennsylvania State System of Higher Education. We have a separate organization that's the Pesce Foundation, but Dr. Shearer had come to our president, Dr. Riley, just as she was starting at Slippery Rock, and said, hey, there's an opportunity to write a grant to Strada Education Foundation. President Riley brought it to me and said, what do you think about this? And I said, well, that's relationships. That's some goal setting in there. This fits really well with retention. And Dr. Riley had really given me carte blanche to say, okay, if you're going to write this grant to Pesce Foundation, how would you structure it? And she allowed me to take that risk and just write it the way I saw fit. And so I think the whole grant was something like a $750,000 grant from Strada Education. And Slippery Rock was awarded $100,000 of that to do with as we saw fit. There's about 5 Pesce universities that are in this experiment through Strada. And so we decided to create the Office of Early College Work-Based Learning. And cutting to the chase, the reason we did it that way is that, if a native student who starts as an FTIC or, first time in college freshman at Slippery Rock makes it to 60 credits here, Darin, their graduation rate exceeds 94%. So if you're going to leave Slippery Rock, and we have a good number of readmissions too, students who readmit and they re-enter their cohort too and graduate. We probably have, 200 or 300 students on campus that are readmits right now. Not all of those were for academic reasons, but So the idea is, and you bet I let students know this, and you bet I let families know this. Encourage your kid to 60 credits. So that there in my, the process in my head was, what are some other things we can get students excited about to get them excited about the things they're studying? Because let's face it, for that first year, which is where most schools are going to lose most of their students, they're taking critical writing. Why? Because writing and public speaking are the two most in demand skills. When you look at labor market analytics, and I can call it up right now in Jobs EQ, which we use, and say, all right, show me the top skills on most job postings for entry level bachelor's degree, verbal and written communications, by far number one across the board. So that's why you're in critical writing, friends. That's why you're in our civil discourse, public speaking. We call it civil discourse here. 100. And so these students are taking these classes, but they don't necessarily have the context behind why, the why. And so the question was then in my head, can we get these younger students out doing a variety, an array of work-based learning experiences that will essentially build context, build network for them as well, that they can then bring back to the school and say, okay, I don't like this class necessarily, but now I see the why behind it. So I'm going to do my very best with it, even use my campus resources so that I can get through this and do it successfully with a passing score. One of the things I always tell our students is, don't pay your money at window one and then drive off without your food. You are paying for tutoring, peer academic coaching. You're paying for Office of Inclusive Excellence. You're paying for student engagement leadership in clubs and organizations and internships and early college work-based learning. Why would you pay your money? You wouldn't do it at Starbucks or McDonald's. Why would you do that here? That makes no sense. And so we have worked to normalize engaging in all of the resources here, including the new early college work-based learning program. So early college WBL has been around for about a year and a half. And actually the office that leads that is right next door to me here. Sue Bowser does a really nice job with that.
Yeah, it hits on some things that we've been talking about in this series on experiential learning, and just to sort of stay with it, your approach at helping the students get to the why behind certain types of courses feels like the low hanging fruit of the at the academic level, and I'm wondering about, not to get too granular here, but when is, in your view, or I should say at Slippery Rock, because I know that this isn't all your domain, but like, when do you determine something is credit bearing versus non credit bearing when you think about like that example, right? Like, so that example to me feels like something, you build a work based learning component into the credit bearing course, or you build a separate 2 credit course that is sort of a lead up to it or something. But how do you sequence it, and then when is it credit bearing versus not? Like, how does that shake out?
Yeah, I think that most schools are, let's talk about internships specifically. I think curricular based internships mostly happen at the junior and senior level in most institutions. And that's fairly traditional here as well. Not every one of our programs requires an internship, but a lot of them do. And, exercise science, of course, sport management has to do 800 hours in the field. I mean, the idea that just getting a degree in sport management is going to get you a job in sport is ridiculous. You have to have a network. And so our students spend 800 hours in the field. Hospitality and tourism is another area where there's a lot of that going on. Accounting is an internship's required. In our psychology department, they have a few different work-based learning ways, methodologies where students can fulfill that, knowing that some of those students may come from lower socioeconomic means and might not be able to afford to just walk off and do an unpaid internship, which obviously in a lot of the social sciences, that's a thing. So one thing a university can do there is to offer alternative work-based learning practices that students can engage in during senior year or during senior seminar, or in coinciding with senior seminar, that will also fulfill that work-based learning thing. So I think here at Slippery Rock, a lot of the credit-bearing opportunities have been at the junior and senior level. Uh, but I don't think our students are not averse to the idea that I'm going to do a non-credit internship, especially if the way we promote it is, hey, it's orientation. Let's talk about internships. And the parents are sitting up saying, what? No, no, seriously, we want you to come and engage with our early college work-based learning program, sru.edu/WBL. And there's lots of different ways you can engage with that. And by the way, even as a first year student, some of those are going to be paid. A lot of those are going to be paid. And so the idea is rather than going home and working in fast food or retail, which are great experiences because you're working with the public and that's always going to build skills that are going to be transferable. Let's instead, if you're going into it, let's say you're in our management program and maybe you're in the supply chain track, let's see if next summer near your home, we can work with you to score a part-time gig, turn it into a non-credit internship that you're doing that is much more closely related to what you're doing. So the junior senior level experience are always overseen by a faculty member. That's in our union contract, and that's fine. Um, and then they're going to help the student determine what the learning outcomes are going to be, and they're going to be very management supply chain specific. And only those faculty would know what those are because that's their area of expertise. For early college work-based learning, we really focus on what are the top power skills that the general bachelor's degree market looks for. So when students are sitting down with Stu and writing learning outcomes for their non-credit, often paid internships, and by the way, internships are not the only thing you can do in early college work-based learning. Different things students can engage in when they're writing those, and Sue teaches them how to use Bloom's taxonomy to write learning outcomes, we really focus more on the transferable skills. And so that particular experience doesn't have to be overseen by a faculty member here. That doesn't violate any union agreement. Sue can oversee those. It's a part-time job where we're just helping the student extract more of the necessary skills for the future and ultimately be able to talk about those on a resume and then in a job interview and then recognize that they have those skills so that it makes them ultimately a very retainable and promotable employee.
It really feels like in this conversation, you've so strategically deployed these opportunities. Where are the opportunities in your mind at Slippery Rock to do more or different types of work-based learning? Like, what are you excited about trying out next and that kind of thing? I'm just curious.
Well, speaking more parochially in my area here, and and we have an interesting, by the way, I should mention that we do have a very interesting structure for early college work-based learning. Sue, who runs that, is located in CCAP. She comes to all of our meetings. She goes to conferences with us, but she actually reports to the provost area. Since we are a union campus and credit-bearing internships are under faculty, what I hope to do eventually is help Sue's office to become more of a clearinghouse for students for credit and non-credit internships. Sue would not oversee credit-bearing internships, but she would be a place where students can come more readily to find those and find a essential resource for job shadowing opportunities and things like that as well. So we want to grow along those lines. And that's why I put it under academic affairs, even though she has a dotted line to me here in enrollment management. And I know a lot of times dotted line relationships don't work. This works swimmingly. Sue's direct report is to Tim Slaker, who is our associate provost for academic innovation and our dean of graduate studies. He's a great guy to work with. He's also working with workforce development and some of the other innovative things that we're doing here at the Rock. But other things that students can engage in here generally at the Rock, Darin, I jotted just a few down just so I can remember, things that I would define as work-based learning. We've got our standard internships, credit and non-credit, including the early college work-based learning internships. Service learning, we have a wonderful service learning area under Jeffrey Rathliff, Carnegie Classified, and have been now for 2 times. I know we just went through our renewal here, and clinicals for a lot of our clinical programs. We have, of course, the nursing here, music therapy, OT, PT, PA, exercise science, short-term site-based work, where students are going out and doing short-term site-based work as part of a class. We have micro internships. I know you interviewed the leader of Parker Dewey. That was a great podcast that you had there. Really enjoyed listening to that. And so we are a Parker Dewey client, and we have the full Parker Dewey package here, and our students are applying and picking up some of those industry-sponsored projects. We have different classes that have had industry-sponsored projects. We have some great industry partners. Some of the big employers in Pittsburgh, PNC Bank, First National Bank, Highmark, Dick's, sporting goods. So we work with lots of great companies in the area who really want to support our students' learning. Purposeful job shadowing, as opposed to just job shadowing and following people around, making sure students are asking good open-ended questions. You and I have talked about on-campus jobs over the last few years. Amanda Nichols up in our payroll office has done a really great job at totally transforming student employment here on campus. Entrepreneurial ventures. We've had for a number of years our SEA, our Sustainable Enterprise Accelerator, where students can help other people start businesses and along the way learn how to start their own. Consulting. Over in our public relations area, we have PRSSA organization where our public relations students are a little consulting company, and they'll go out and work with small companies and learn how to consult on public relations. Because let's face it, if they want to go to a creative agency, they're going to have to learn how to consult with external businesses. Simulations. I don't know if you've talked with the people from Forage yet, but workplace simulations are great. A lot of our students are now completing Forage work-based simulations through our Forage system. That's over in Sue's area in early college work-based learning. And what a great way for first or second year students to get engaged more in the world of work. And when they get that little badge at the end that they completed, they can put that right on their LinkedIn profile and then follow that company where they already have the name of that company on their profile. It's all good. Portfolio-based programs over in education, over in our communication studies where they have to build their portfolio over time. Independent research, as well as preceptor research with a faculty member. And that doesn't even really scratch the surface. There's lots of other ways students can get engaged here at the Rock. Some of it does fall under early college work-based learning. Where I've been looking to go more locally here is I've been toying with the idea of an early college research-based learning practice. I have a faculty member who's in the library who's wonderful and really works with students on research a lot. Sometimes she feels a little underutilized and she really wants to work more closely with students on developing a spirit of inquiry. And I thought, wow, what better place to take a student who's coming to the Rock as a consumer of education, sit in class, take tests, get degree, to someone who's a creator of new information and a creator of new ideas, right? The kind of student that you often see admitted to an R1 or maybe to a Carnegie Mellon down the road or something like that. To take somebody who has never seen themselves as a scholar. And by the end of the first year, they see themselves as a scholar. So that's something I'm toying with. I have been working with my academic continuity committee to shape that before we jump into it. But eventually we'll come up with an approach there. So, man, there's just such an array of opportunities for students. And that's why I get so disappointed when students look at college as sit in class, take tests, walk across stage, get degree. Right. No job description has ever asked for that person.
No, I mean, you're really describing in granular detail the opportunities that colleges and universities both have at raising the bar for overall experience that both improves the ability to acquire knowledge, but also apply it in employment friendly ways as well. I'm wondering this. So if you all this, even with what you have today, you have things that you facilitate on campus in the academic units. You have different business partners that are bringing projects in through your office and through these other parts of the university. You have ed tech companies that fill certain roles like Forage and the like. And I'm wondering about, in your mind, does there need to be almost a layer above all work-based learning or all experiential learning that would allow you to, almost from like the student information system, like see a student and see how they're progressing in that way, not just how they're progressing, in terms of courses taken and credits achieved. Like, is there sort of a master framing necessary that would allow you to truly dial these experiences in at the highest level for all students to make sure that everybody was getting some equilibrium of this type of experience? Have you thought about that? It just feels like there's a lot of point solutions, And I wonder how difficult that feels to manage at the scale that you're doing it institutionally, not just in your area, right? Like it just feels to me like it could be difficult.
I think it's really related to size of institution as well. Then again, when you get to the very large institutions, they are so bifurcated in terms of by college. I mean, one college might use Handshake for their career model, their career management system, and another college at the same university might use Simplicity. Here, that's not the case. Like we are a Handshake campus, and we have a system contract, so all 10 universities use Handshake, as do a lot of the schools around this area. That when we first brought Civitas on as our CRM, our internal CRM, and predictive analytics and impact analysis model, and I talked to our president of our union. He sort of tongue in cheek said, "Tell me what system I can stop using if I'm going to start using this." And he did that obviously to say, "This is what you're going to hear from faculty. We are systemed to death." And so I don't even, we just converted, we're a banner school, we're a Lucian banner school. And then we went to a state system banner, which we're calling One Sys. And that's happened over the last 5 or 6 years. We were in the last group of 3, and we transitioned last year. And obviously, there was lots of changes that had to take place. But our IATS department has done a great job of getting all of those enterprise systems to talk to Banner in the way it must. And I know all the IT people listening are thinking, "Oh, I don't want anything to do with that." Right. I mean, there was well over 100 systems that were talking to that. And to add another system in there, it's like, it gets back to the question we talked about. I think when we first chatted is what's the hiccup when somebody's coming and selling you a new system, and there's a couple there. It's There's no one size fits all. First of all, even in Banner, as you transition and put 10 universities who are theoretically similar, oh man, there was a lot of work to be done there at the state level to get us all on the same sheet of music. And even then, we're still finagling. Well, let's call this field this, and we'll use it for that, right? It's not like we can customize it. The other issue that I see a lot of times with these systems, and if there was this universal system where we could do something like that, and I'm sure there are people ready to offer it to me, is when you come to my door as a regional comprehensive state university that's tuition driven and publicly funded, the idea that you're coming to my door with, okay, if you have an enrollment of 1,000 to 5,000, it's this price, and 5,001 to 10,000, that is not helpful, vendors. That's not helpful. You have to sell your systems based on how much I can spend per student. I don't know budgets at some of these big R1s, but my guess is that a similar function like CCAP at Duke or Berkeley or Stanford can spend a whole heck of a lot more per student on these systems than can I. So it doesn't matter what my enrollment is. That's not how you should be doing your pricing structure. Your pricing structure should be based on what an institution can actually spend. And that would be one of my biggest gripes about all the calls and emails I get from folks. And eventually I kind of sometimes block them. It's just like, no, if I take your system on, I'm going to have to get rid of something else. It's not like I can just add on another one. I'm going to have to go raise the money to do it. So would it be helpful? Possibly. But just the contortedness of a system that can manage all that, Darin, it boggles my mind.
Well, and by the way, I've talked to a lot of these companies, a lot of them for the podcast and also just in my consulting, and I don't see anybody with that solution that I'm proposing. Like I feel like, and I'm not even saying I'm proposing it. I'm saying it feels to me like there's a pain or a coming pain in the space that could, I don't even know if it would be solved by a quote software company, an ed tech company, but it feels to me like we talk more and more about this idea of authentic assessment because our assessment models and grading models are getting a bit disrupted by AI, and we're starting to see. I think we're starting to see a need to break down some of the existing legacy systems that have been in place for a long time and replace them in some ways, maybe not with full new enterprise systems, but with other ways that you can unsilo data to understand the student journey more clearly across everything from their academic experience to their experiential learning experience, if we want to call it that. So I'm just wondering about it. But I actually do want to talk to you about you've had some really good, and you hit on it already, but you've had some really good and reasonable concerns about vendor positioning and messaging, um, and you brought up earlier Simon Sinek's Golden Circle, um, but advice you have for the vendor community at writ large in work-based learning, right? This could be advice on what you don't see them offering in terms of a feature or a function, or this could be advice about how they approach you, which you've sort of started to hint at, right? like around you went right to the pricing models, which I also struggle with, and I'm actually helping another company in a different area try and come up with a more creative model for the exact same reason that you've pointed out. And it's hard. It's hard to figure out pricing in this space. But yeah, other advice, either feature sets you don't see existing that should, or approaches that people just aren't sensitive enough to take. Um, we don't need to call anybody out, but I think uh, your help in this area is good because you see this from a lot of different angles, and I appreciate your
Two
thinking
general
through
things
it.
I'll share, and one is probably going to be generally helpful to most vendors, and the other one might be more specific in certain cases. The first one is you have to come at us with a "what don't I know" attitude. I don't know that a lot of these vendors have a chief innovation officer, or we all have account reps, right? And it's hit or miss as to whether you got a good one. Now, when I look at Civitas, and I can call them out because we've had them for a number of years, and I look at our rep Jackie Harris, Jackie feels like a member of Slip Rock staff. When I sit with Jackie, she knows us so well, and she knows the little things that we need. But you know what? At Civitas, I know Greg Lamb, their chief technology officer. I know Will, their CEO, because they invite us to their conference and they want to talk to us and know how can we improve this system. And so, yeah, if I want some development done, I'm going to pay for that. But a lot of times when we've had conversations with the CTO at Civitas, it's been like, yeah, you know what? This makes sense for all our clients. We're going to change our system. Where do you see that? You don't see that very often. People, well, we'll change it for the big R1s. We'll change it if you have an enrollment over 30,000. But for you, Slippery Rock, with 8,500, no, it has got to be universal concern that we want our system to work the absolute optimum for all of our clients. And I don't universally see that. I think a few vendors have come along. I'll shout out to Handshake and some of the things that they've come up with recently, like the new tool in First Destination, which we're not using yet, but it'll actually go out and search LinkedIn and try to find where these people were placed. That's fantastic. Sorry, I used the placement word. My career friends are going to get mad at me for that. So that's one thing. What don't you know? And don't stop asking that question because there's a lot you don't know. My context is very different from CMU, from Pitt, from Penn State. The other thing is this is where it gets a little more specific for people who are selling systems that work with advisement, but it's also something you have to be aware of overall. Are you going to a school that's a faculty advisement model or a professional advisement model? And when Civitas came to us, for example, they were very much designed for a professional advisement model. But specifically because they've been working with Slip Rock, which is a faculty, they have adapted their systems so that they work better for us, faculty model. And we don't have enough time to go through all the granular things that we've asked them to do that they've gone ahead and done for us. They didn't charge us for those because they saw it was just good for their client base. That's the attitude we need to see. So I don't know if you need to get a lot of young interns in there in IT or in writing code, or turn to AI to write more of your code to be able to react to those things faster. But we don't see that with some of the bigger systems who do seem to want to respond to the big schools. But they really don't necessarily. My perception is that some of the vendors don't really care if I successfully use their system. as much as a big one that they can go and brag about, hey, XYZ school uses us. I'll be honest, that doesn't impress me. If you tell me that, you know, I'm a Buckeyes fan, so if Ohio State uses our system, sorry, it doesn't impress me. It just doesn't. In fact, that's like, nah, no thanks. Tell me five regional comprehensive institutions that are tuition driven, that are 20% funded by the state, that use you and how they've used those systems. Remain curious and keep asking, what don't I know, and keep changing and adapting to serve all of your clients.
I love it. I recently pulled down some data, um, just U.S. enrollment data. I think it was somewhere near 5 million students are in the regional comprehensive universities around the country, and it's my case to a lot of startups and a lot of ed tech companies to, there's only 19 million students enrolled in U.S. institutions. If a quarter of them are in regional comprehensives, I don't care if Slippery Rock only has 7,500. If they could be a client, that means you've just sort of proven at least some portion of product market fit in a really large sector of the space. And the other thing I would say is that all the elite institutions, quite frankly, you could have the best solution in the world to sell them on work-based learning or on analytics or on some other area. And the truth is that they either build them themselves or they don't feel like they need it because things are going swimmingly at those institutions, right? The ones that actually have the enrollment challenges, the ones that have the retention challenges, the ones that are actually proactively recruiting new first gen adult learners and others into their programs from their local communities are the ones that need the greatest support. So I'm just saying that in furthering your idea that, like, my goodness, you're if someone's only looking at you based on the number of students that you have, they're missing a huge a huge part of the market, not just a huge part of why they ought to be partnering with you and building to suit the needs that you have at the Rock. So, no, this has been super, super helpful. I mean, I think you hit on a lot of the things that I was wondering about um, from a vendor management perspective. But anything else to sort of share from your perspective on the types of solutions you'd like to see developed in the market?
I mean, I don't know that I can name any one particular one. I mean, there's always little glitches that we see on campus, and and we'll talk and we'll lament. Oh, it'd be nice to have a system that did that. But then again, when it's another system, and don't forget, you got lots of users that have to use those systems because students use the systems, alumni use our systems, faculty use our systems, employers use our systems. And what does that, what change does that require? And do I have the staff to adapt to a new system? Thankfully, all of our systems are quite good here, and we're pleased with all of them. Um, I would also add on to something else you'd said, and I'm trying to recall exactly what comment you made, but I'll just state what I was thinking, and that is that, yes, we may have retention challenges at regional comprehensive. But my challenge for retention is very different from Penn West, is very different from Shippensburg, is very different from Youngstown State. And so to know that we all have challenges, that's a very generic bit of knowledge. It's like, will our solution actually help in your specific challenge? And so fortunately, we have come across some great systems that have been helpful. And I think the other point I made in some of our earlier conversations is that, and this is co-readiness, this goes back to co-readiness, is there somebody who's going to own that system and champion that system at that institution? The worst thing you can do is go in and sell a system to somebody, and there's no one single person who is the champion for that system. And then I think you also said vulnerability. Are people willing to use it and make themselves vulnerable to try something new? And sometimes merely the pressure of enrollment and declining enrollment is enough, but that's dragging people reluctantly. You know, you need a lot of case studies, case examples. I know we've been written up on some case studies with Civitas, and we're published with them, and we've done some podcasts with them as well. But that's not because we're great users. It's because we were great together, and we continue to be great together with that vendor. That's a question that vendors can ask themselves. Are we universally good together with the folks that are using our systems? And if the answer is no, that's got to be fixed. That's got to be fixed. And I know we can be tough customers. I know that we can be very, very difficult customers. We try to be gentle with our vendors, but I know not everybody is.
Oh, sure, sure. I I think you've given a lot of really good, thoughtful feedback that the vendor community can appreciate. I think the first part of our conversation, you really have covered a lot that I think the institutional leadership perspective can gain a lot of insight from how you are structured, ways that you've successfully scaled a lot of different meaningful solutions here regarding work-based learning. Um, but I'm wondering, thinking about sort of the regional comprehensive institutions writ large, um, what are some ways that you feel like if you were having a conversation with your peers that wanted to get started or do more, like where would you advise an institution to start when it comes to upping their game around something as strategic as work-based learning?
Well, let's go back to the golden circle. You have to start with why. Why do you want to explore new areas? Oh, it's the right thing to do. That's not enough. Oh, we want to be able to tell more of our prospective students about it. That's not enough. That's not enough. You have to be trying to elicit some kind of change at your institution. There has to be some metric, measurable, observable metric, be it qualitative or quantitative, that you want to change. And so, what is that metric? Early college work-based learning here at the Rock was really applied to further increasing the retention of students in in their first couple of years here at the Rock. I mean, my freshmen are coming back probably at 95% for second semester here this fall, which is great. And then but historically, in recent history, I'm losing 7-8% of my freshman second semester. So you bet I'm already looking at things we could be doing here that we could be injecting into, or as I use the word, inoculating. What could we be inoculating students with in second term to prevent that melt away that would happen between now and the last day of ticketed registration in April, so that I see more of those students registered, which means I've got to study those students carefully. So getting back to your original question is, what is your why? If we're talking about a president of an organization, the provost, if we're talking about somebody who's leading work-based learning, what is the why? It can't just be, this is the right thing to do. We have had in higher education, we've had way too many years and often luxury of doing things because they felt good or because they just seemed like the right thing to do. At least in tuition driven higher ed, those days are over. We cannot do that anymore. It has to be moving some kind of metric. That doesn't mean cold hearted. You could be doing it because you love your students and you want them to walk away with more skills. Great. What are those skills and how are we going to measure them? So
Right.
that is, you start with why, then move to the what, then move to the how. See, a lot of things come into your door from the how. You attend a regional meeting of the 10 universities of PASHE. Hey, did you hear Shippensburg is doing this thing? Well, that's the how. We skip the why and the what. We have to work back. Start by watching Simon Sinek's video on the Golden Circle, or read his book. Start with why. I always I always tell the folks in our office, if you're given time to speak in a class, you got two audiences. You got students and you got faculty. What do you want them to know? What do you want them to do? And always start with why. Always, 100% of the time, or you're not getting invited back. So same thing here. If you're starting a new program, start with why.
I love it. I love it. Um, wow, John, we covered a lot, and I feel like I could probably settle into another hour. Uh,
It's been fun.
but yeah, I really enjoyed this, and I always come away learning quite a bit. And I'm going to have to just go back and absorb this myself. I might have some off uh, off camera follow up conversations with you because I think there's a lot of things to explore based on what you've covered today. But for folks who just want to learn more about what's happening at Slippery Rock or connect with you, what's the best way to contact you?
Well, if you want to know a little bit more about our subdivision, it's just sru.edu slash CCAP, CCAP, and you'll see all of our functional areas there, and we'll be adding some new things coming up here soon. My email is just John with an H, JOHN, Rindy, RINDY, at sru.edu. And I'm also on LinkedIn. Just search me up, but otherwise it's linkedin.com/in/John Rindy.
Awesome. That sounds great. John, thanks again for taking the time, and we'll be with you again soon.
Feel like we could talk for hours, Darin. Thanks a lot. I enjoyed it.